Welcome to In the Deep. I'm your host, Catherine Ingram. The following is an interview with me on Nyck Jeanes' show on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia, recorded in July 2017. It's called Understanding is the Way Forward.
FM, your North Coast Positive with Nyck Jeanes here through to 11 o'clock on Bay FM 999. And just reiterate, thanks for all of those who came to the Bay FM dance party on Saturday night, the 80s dance party. It was wild. I was on the door at the beginning, and that was great, welcoming hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people coming in. Then it was just too much for me. It was all a bit too crazy. I needed a bit of sort of calmness and relaxation. So I decided to get Catherine Ingram in the studio to talk to me today. Catherine Ingram is now a resident, as I just discovered, of this fine area. And good morning to you, Catherine. How are you?
Thank you. Good morning to you.
Nice to welcome you. And I know you've been on Bay FM before with Parvita, who introduced us, but also Alan Clements, who I had on this show a few weeks ago when he was here. You're a good friend of his. You're American, but you're a Dharma dialogue teacher since 1992 or something.
Yes.
Dharma's a very hard word to describe, actually, isn't it?
I know.
To translate.
Yes, I know. I'm ambivalent about even using it because it's sort of too religious for my taste. But but I have retranslated it in my way, because it's a word I've had a long, long relationship with. I used to study Buddhist meditation a long time ago, 17-year period. And the word for me has come to mean essentially finding an underlying harmony through any circumstance of life, whether it's work, relationships, the crises we face, whatever it is, that you might be able to tune into, at least in yourself, some way of perceiving, some way of holding it, some way of understanding. And that's, for me, the definition of Dharma as I live it.
It's amazing that the word actually has crossed a number of religions, hasn't it, in the East? It's sort of found in even Jainism through Buddhism and Hinduism and so
very
forth.
Much an Indian root of the word, Sanskrit word.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people see it as the work of being, true to oneself. Yeah. One could say. Would that be a fair?
That is a fair. Yeah. And also sometimes equated with the Tao.
With the Tao. I never even thought about that, of course, the way of things. Yeah. Now, what interested me partly about, or many things that you've done, because you're a former journalist, specialising in issues of conscience and activism. You've authored 2 books of non-fiction and 1 novel called A Crack in Everything, which most people will know comes, of course, from a Leonard Cohen song. We'll talk about Leonard Cohen in a little while, because you were a friend of Leonard's. And you have also published hundreds of articles on conscience and activism through the 80s and 90s and so forth. So you've been around the New Age world for a long time.
Yeah.
So I thought what would be interesting would be to get your insight, because you're also the co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts, and my goodness, you've got a big CV in this area. So you've been around a long time. What has changed in the New Age, to put it under a big umbrella, which is a phrase I don't particularly like anymore, New Age, but nevertheless, and what has not happened that you perhaps personally thought would happen and change?
Yeah, great question. Well, certainly one thing that has changed is that it has gone mainstream. Meditation has gone mainstream.
Yep.
Back when we were first starting out in 1974, it was, just the weirdest, only the weirdos.
I know.
And it was a very tiny group, as you probably know.
Yeah.
But over the years, of course, it's now, it's basically all over television.
Mindfulness is everywhere now. It's corporate.
Yeah,
Oprahized. Yes.
Yeah, and now you just said the word corporate. One of the things that I think is unfortunate is that it's been co-opted by corporations to some degree, and in the service of productivity, because more focused minds can get more done. And also it calms them down.
Right.
So you can make a case for that being a good thing, and that maybe sometimes people might then start questioning what they're doing.
Do you think that's happening?
I don't know. I don't hang out with that crowd so much. Not to make people, I mean, these are just people, of course. Yes. But if you take the collective of a corporation's ethos, if you take the values of a corporation, that's to make profit, and whatever it takes to make profit is fair game. So I would hope that there are situations where people begin to question those kinds of values by being quiet and sort of feeling into themselves, and maybe the question arises, what am I doing, in this job? But, and then on the other side of that, I've known so many people who do work those kinds of jobs and who have families and have kids in school, and, so it's not a simple answer in terms of how to hold this and how to understand it.
No, absolutely. I mean, in terms of consciousness, and again, a very difficult word to define or to use, to know what we mean when we use it. In terms of consciousness, are we growing as a species? Do you think there is, and I hesitate to use the word evolution even with this, but is there an evolution in consciousness that you've seen in this time, given all that?
What I feel is it's a race almost, that there is a lot of waking up. And there is a lot of understanding of a world community, I was just listening to an interview yesterday with, I think, Robert Sapolsky or someone, and we were they were talking about how if there were an asteroid about to hit Earth and we had enough time to try to consider what to do, the world community would come together.
It's the subject of many sort of Hollywood large science fiction sort of things. The great catastrophe, the Armageddon that's about to occur, and we all come together.
It becomes a unifying force.
Yeah.
But, in effect, we do have something like that now happening. Well, we do have something like that happening, which is called, climate chaos.
Yes.
And
well, Donald Trump, you left the US the day that after Trump was elected. Is that right?
That's right.
You got out as soon as you possibly could.
The next day.
Shows you obviously have some wisdom, clearly.
I can't take full credit for my prescience. I already had the ticket, but
right.
Anyway, but it was unfortunate timing. But anyway, we would all come together if we understood fully what we face. What we do see is there is a lot of coming together. There is a kind of what Paul Hawken calls blessed unrest.
Blessed unrest, yes.
And that there is a lot of smart minds and hearts working on this. At the same time, the forces of destruction have never been more powerful because now they have the money, the tools, the governments. And so it's really, we're in a race, probably for our survival.
Yeah. It's interesting, it reminds me a little bit too, talking about the two sides, the dark and the light, the paradox of that. The pendulum swing from one to the other, one could say too, in a day, in our hearts, in our minds, in our spirit, in our soul.
Indeed.
Reminds me a bit of Ken Wilber and his work with spiral dynamics.
Yeah.
You're probably familiar with, I'm sure, which is not his work, but this notion that...
He's another old friend of mine.
Right, no doubt, yes. And that you have to really incorporate all into the growth, into the new. Like you can't just deny, that's evil, that's bad, that's wrong, no matter how horrific it is.
Sure. It's better to see ignorance than evil,
Yes, better to see ignorance than evil.
Ignorance can be transformed,
yeah, that's good. So I wonder whether that's, where we're at now is the possibility that we actually have to incorporate everything, including the Donald Trumps of the world,
absolutely,
into some sort of global solution that can move forward from this point.
Yeah, I mean, because I studied nonviolent strategies, my first book was called In the Footsteps of Gandhi. I came to discover through talking with many, many people who were effective in movements that the only way forward is through conversation and understanding. The only real way forward. Sometimes one has to do what you can to stop a certain circumstance.
Sometimes you've got to lie down in front of a bulldozer.
That's right, yeah. And probably, I'm hesitant to say this, but sometimes you may have to pick up a sword.
Yeah, sometimes you may have to pick up a sword.
Right.
But that's a strong thing for a Dharma teacher to say.
Right.
I like it.
And someone who's written a book on nonviolent strategies.
There you go.
But I have come to see it over the many years since I've been considering these things.
Yes.
And let's say those cases are rare.
Yep.
But they sometimes are. But mostly you go forward through understanding and communication, and it takes a lot sometimes to really hear someone whose views you find kind of abhorrent.
Yeah, absolutely. And you call this actually, we segue into Dharma resilience.
Yeah.
This notion of finding ways to reflect and calm oneself in the face of these desperate crises, global threats and destruction intensifying by the day. So what does that mean? What does Dharma resilience look like?
Right.
When someone comes to you, to a class of yours, what happens there?
Well, I just said on Sunday, and it's a phrase that keeps coming for me, courage, courage, not hope.
I don't like the word hope, personally.
No. And and I know people say, oh, one has to have hope and all of those things, but really, courage, stick with courage. Let yourself, sort of induce a feeling of lion-heartedness.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
And of letting go, as needed. I mean, we're all going to face the big let go, right? So
the big let go?
Yeah.
You mean death?
Yes,
yeah.
that.
That's kind of the least of our worries right now, I think, for most of us. I mean, in some way. I mean, I shouldn't say that.
No,
really.
I understand what you mean. But it's all the, all the other kinds of letting go that one, obviously, if letting go is on the table, in other words, there's nothing more to be done but let go, then it's good to have that muscle quite well exercised.
Yeah, good point. Silence is obviously a key element of Dharma dialogues.
Yes.
What is in the silence that we are so missing, most of us in this world?
Yeah. It has to do with how we use our attention. So let's assume that we can tune into a certain quiet frequency in our own being, almost like a witnessing presence. All of these words are going to be slightly inaccurate because it's silent.
Right. There's nothing going on.
Yeah, right. But it's sort of just being in a simple way and letting information kind of flow through you, whether it's sights, sounds, thoughts, whatever it happens to be. You're kind of like this empty space through which it flows. And it will do its own work. I always say silence will do all the work for you. Just a kind of quietness of the heart doesn't mean that you don't speak or that you don't think or that sometimes you don't shout or laugh or cry. All of that can be happening, but there can be a kind of deeper resonance happening with just simply being that's letting things, like I say, move through.
Is that a visceral thing? Is it a physical thing? I mean, there's a bit of a paradox there, but in a way, and a good friend of mine now talks about being at home in your body.
Yes.
And that we talk about that a lot, somatics. I had someone on with Biodance before and 5 rhythms and these sort of any form of dance or movement or music itself, all these elements. But in a way, being home in the body is again another paradox to me, because often we think in spiritual work that it's about getting out somehow, about leaving behind, about moving to a higher level, all this kind of idea.
No. I'm not interested in transcendence, no.
I'm not interested in transcendence. That's refreshing. Good. Are you sure you belong in Byron Bay? No, kidding. Go on.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think it is a visceral experience, actually. I think that it's my experience, and what I recommend is really living in your senses. Here you are, alive in your senses. This is it.
Yes.
This is where you are. Yeah, exactly. I couldn't emphasize that more. In fact, I always talk to my groups about being an awake animal, like really understand that you're an animal, and taste and feel and see.
Liking it.
Yeah.
Good. Fantastic. Well, folks, you're listening to this. You may be very interested in Catherine Ingram's Dharma Dialogues, which I should mention as we speak right now. The next one is tomorrow night. July 13th at Temple Byron, here in Byron Bay. And then you've got 2 dates in August, the 3rd and the 10th, and 2 in September, the 7th and the 14th. And you've also got a retreat coming up in Lennox Head. How's that work? A day retreat in July and September? Is that like
July 23rd? Yeah.
Okay, July 23rd.
It's a day of. It's basically silence, but there are 2 sessions with me of Dharma Dialogues. But otherwise, we're sort of silently together, sitting, walking, eating. The rest of the day is quiet.
Yeah.
And it's a little mini retreat, a little dip into calm.
Fantastic. We'll give the well, you can basically go to catherineingram.com. That's Ingram, Catherine with a C, CATHERINEINGRAM.com. Catherine Ingram, and you get the details of all those. In the little time we've got left, you were a friend of Leonard Cohen's, and your one novel is called A Crack in Everything, which no doubt has got something to do with Leonard.
Yeah, he said there's a crack in everything. That's
where the
how
light
the
gets
light
in.
gets
That's
in.
beautiful.
Yeah, we were friends. I considered him one of my best friends for 25 years.
Wow.
really close friends. And I realized in his passing that he was also a mentor. You know, when he was alive, I just thought of him as my friend. But now that I feel into what it is having him not here anymore, I really see what a mentor, what an inspiration he was for me.
I mean, his music, in a sense, was a Dharma dialogue, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and he was a Buddhist for many years himself. Yeah.
Although I wouldn't categorize him
quite like that. Yeah, I almost, when I said that, I thought, well, he's not. That's actually not quite accurate. I get that.
He was very interested in lots of different traditions.
What don't we know about Leonard that you could tell that an audience out there might be interesting? Because clearly,
well, a lot of people don't realize how much fun he was. I mean, sometimes people will say, "Oh, his music was so depressing or so gloomy." I mean,
I'm going to slip my wrist if I listen to another Leonard Cohen song. Oh my God! That is so super. It's unbelievable that people actually think that. But anyway, that's my opinion and yours.
He was so fun. He always had a twinkle in his eye, even when he was in extreme pain at the end. Yeah. I mean, he always had a little mirthful. He was always joking. And another thing about him was, you know, if you went out to lunch with him, let's say, by the end of the meal, the waiter or the waitress, even though they had no idea who he was, because to many people he was just this old man, they would be in love with him because he would have said so many kind of clever little sweet quips to them in a kind of meeting of the heart and an understanding that they were serving him. So there was incredible gratitude. He was he was always so grateful and so generous as a human being.
Yes.
He was really a first-class creature, I mean, honestly.
I saw his concert in Brisbane here a few years ago. I think maybe the last time he was here.
Yeah.
And exactly what you're saying. He was an exquisite, humble man on stage and with that cheekiness, and that edge somewhere and just beautifully expressing himself as a being and comfortable in his own skin.
Absolutely. And so honest. Another thing that I take from him in terms of art is his bravery in being just really authentic. Like when he said in one of his songs, In My Secret Life, he said, I smile when I'm angry, I cheat and I lie, I do what I have to do to get by. Just that kind of total brutal honesty, So there were so many things about him that were... One time I was over at his house. I used to go over there for Friday night Shabbos dinner. And one time I went, my brother had just died, and I was just shattered. And Leonard, well, he was never, kind of a sentimental type, but he knew the state that I was in. And all through the evening, he kept putting little presents next to me, like small things, but beautiful things, like a Japanese picture frame, which I've actually put my brother's picture in. It's sitting on my dresser. Or, just beautiful little incense holders and this and that. I can't even remember. But through the night, next to my plate would suddenly appear some pretty little present, hundreds of memories like that. Just
beautiful. You've just wanted to touch finally on your work with the Global Animal Foundation, which you're on the board of currently.
Yes, correct.
You've become a bit of an animal rights activist. How does that come about? Are you a vegan then? Whoops. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Can we ask another question?
Oh, terribly sorry. Whoops. I should have done my research properly. You like a bit of bacon, do you? Good on you. Bit of crispy bacon in the mornings. No, but
not quite that, but anyway, yes, I am on the board of Global Animal. It's called. It's mainly it's an kind of communication and information based thing. You can look it up. And what we do is, first of all, we like to get out the animal rights issues. We like to cover them, sort of journalistically based.
Okay.
But then occasionally, because there's a lot of people going to the site, if there's an issue on the earth that is desperate, we're able to quickly raise money. For instance, with Fukushima, all those people left their homes, but they couldn't get back to them in many cases, and their animals, their pets were trapped.
Wow.
So we quickly raised in a couple of days, and the people who work for Global Animal are very, very dedicated. They found people who were allowed to go in, and we quickly raised like $30,000 to just pay people to go in, like workers to go in
get the animals out,
get the pets.
Wow.
And different things like that, just various actions that can happen quickly because we have a really direct line to our community.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll have to leave it there, Catherine. Thank you so much. Catherine Ingram, Dharma Dialogues teacher, and here in Australia, now living in Australia, living in Lennox Head, and doing these Dharma Dialogue events, one tomorrow night at Temple Byron, July 13th from 7:30, and 2 in August and 2 in September. You can go to her website for all those, and also the Dharma Dialogues and Day Retreat in Lennox in July and September. CatherineIngram.com. Great pleasure to have you with us this morning. No doubt we'll get you back and talk about some more specific things at other times.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. This has been In the Deep. You can find the entire list of In the Deep podcasts at CatherineIngram.com, where you can also book a private session by phone or Skype and see my schedule of upcoming events, such as our spectacular retreat in Italy next October of 2018. If you're a regular listener, please consider making either a one-time or a recurring tax-deductible donation in any amount that is comfortable for you. Till next time.